Hey everyone, we'll be live with you in just 1 second. We're taking care of a couple of technical issues, and we will be right on to take flight. Because it's like, hey, the one of the overhead things won't close. We're just going to be 30 minutes, but you also know, as the person on the plane, that it's not going to be 30 minutes. It's going to be 5 minutes or 3 hours, and you don't know which one it is, and you're just staring down that reality. That's what's happening right now here on Take Flight. We've got a maintenance person on the job. They'll be here with us in just 1 second, just 30 minutes. The air condition is not on because it would waste jet fuel, and we don't want to crash in the ocean or whatever. We'll be back in 5 minutes. All right, everybody. I just talked to the tower, and it seems like there's a little bit more traffic on the runway. Oh wait, no, just clear it up. Here we go. It's time to take flight.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Take Flight, the show that helps new designers get their dreams off the runway and into the sky. I'm your flight attendant, Kat, and I would love to introduce you to our flight crew. In the back of the plane, making everything run and treating you with the honesty you all deserve, we have Tony. Can I get a big old thank you, Tony, in all caps in the chat for Tony, please?
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Tony. And in the front of the craft, we have our pilot. We have Celeste. Hi, Celeste.
Hello. Hi. How are you?
I'm alive and well. Oh,
that's wonderful.
I love to do it. And in the co-pilot seat, helping Celeste navigate us on our journey, we have Viditya Valetti. Viditya Valetti is to mess with play and interactivity. His work spans several genres and styles, from world-building games like A Land Once Magic, bombastic adventure games like Bloodbeam Badlands, and intimate experiences like The Fire Flickers Between You. Outside his personal work, Viditya has written for industry favorites such as Paizo's Pathfinder and Starfinder, Rowan Rourke and Deckard's The Spire, and Possum Creek Games' Wonder Home. Hi, Viditya. I'm so glad to have you on today.
I'm so glad to be here.
I need to interject real quick. Viditya, do you have any cool things you're taking part in this January?
Am I doing anything really cool this January?
Do you have anything coming out this January as part of any new initiatives that are launching?
I don't know, Tony. Is there something? I think there's something up in the horizon, right? A really fun and cool RPG zine club.
That's right. October, we have confirmed now October 3rd is our hard launch date, but we are soft launching on October 1st for RPG Zine Club. Get fresh new zines every month, and coming in January, you can get Longsword for our adventure game subscription by Viditya and Valetti, our pilot this evening. And now I'm going to disappear again. Bye.
Bye, Tony. How does someone get in on that gig? Okay. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Well, great. We love it. That's rpgzine.club. So today we have got Celeste with us. I'm so excited. You're doing great. I asked how you were doing earlier. That's why I just said that. Don't worry about it.
It's
sick.
fine.
I'm sick, and I'm coming to you live from a hotel room in the frozen north. And I'm still here because safety. As you can tell, I'm a little bit scrambled, everybody, but we're going to get it done together. Before we get started, a brief safety demonstration. In case of an emotional emergency, please familiarize yourself with the exits to the stream and assist yourself before helping others. On today's flight, we may be passing through areas of authoritarian government abuses of power. We value your comfort and safety here at Take Flight Airlines. If these conditions would be unsafe for you, please feel free to join us for another flight. So now that we've got that done, and I have hit the button that plays it again in French, Celeste, could you please give us an elevator pitch? What are you working on right now?
Sure thing. I'm currently working on, in the very early stages, a game called Seven Cities. Seven Cities is, well, it's a lot, but if I had to give an elevator pitch, I'd say it's a tabletop role-playing game about survival and discovery across 7 different dystopias. It's also a game about an eldritch time snake telling you to overthrow the government. Player characters are each ordinary denizens of these different cities, which are each realms unto themselves. They are worlds that normally would have no connection with each other. You could call it a multiverse, maybe. I don't really like that idea as a conception of it, because these worlds are not separated in space, they're separated across time. They occupy the same space at different times. And so the party plays ordinary people from these worlds who one day have an ability awakened within them to move between them. They don't travel deliberately. I like to conceptualize the cities as days of the week, and there are 7 of them. So at each dawn, the party will find themselves someplace new, having to brave new challenges, meet new allies and enemies, and eventually, once a full week has passed, find themselves right back where they were before to start the cycle anew.
All right. It sounds like a really big, ambitious, delightful undertaking.
It is a very big, ambitious, hopefully delightful world. So I hope so.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's nothing better than a hyper-specific pitch. I think that's something that always really excites me.
Yes.
It's like, how do you pitch this game? And you're like, you can't use like the normal genre conventions. It's like, I gotta tell you about it, right? And that's how we're saying. I love it.
Yeah.
The metaphor I tend to use, I don't know how good it will be as it's a bit dated, but if you know what a Viewmaster is, they were little toys, sort of red plastic, and you look through them, and they have a cardboard disc that goes in the top, and the disc would have a series of often connected images, like they'd be pictures of animals, or they'd be pictures of landmarks in a certain place, and you'd put the disc in the top and you'd click it, and every time you clicked it, you'd see a different picture. I think of the cities as days, or as pictures on that disc, and I think of your sight line as the linear flow of time.
Oh.
At dawn each day, a city moves out of the flow of linear time. So everything in that city effectively goes into stasis. It phases out. It does not exist. So
Oh,
if you're living in the city, a whole week passes, but as far as you're concerned, it's just a moment. Everybody lives a single connected existence, Monday into Tuesday into Wednesday, etc. But for the rulers of these worlds, who fashioned these worlds into being, who killed time and carved it up in order to do so,
Mhm.
they experience each day, and they are able to plot and plan and scheme between them. As of character creation, the party also gains that ability. Having that ability will make them a target of the rulers of these realms, known as the Seven.
Mhm.
It might make them a tool that the Seven seek to use, sort of controlling the party to puppet them against others. But it also gives the party power that they can use to fight back and maybe change things for the better in all of these worlds.
Mhm.
oh,
That is a big part of what I want from this game, is this idea of the party's actions creating lasting effects in the world that can be observed. That was something that we really emphasized when I played this setting in a different system at a table that I ran. So that's something that I'd like to emphasize in the rules as well as just really interesting, big, bombastic conceptual abilities that the party can get their hands on and utilize.
Okay.
okie dokie. So, if you're new to the show, let me introduce you to the format. For the next half hour or so, me, Viditya, and you guys in chat are going to ask questions of Celeste so we can figure out exactly where this project is and what it might need to get to where Celeste wants it to be. So, feel free to ask your questions in chat. I'll pass them on to Celeste. And then after that, we're going to turn the tables, and Celeste will be the one asking the questions. Don't worry, chat. You can still get in on that too.
Okay. I also want to just point out, if you see my head down, I'm writing little notes because that helps me keep things in mind. Because I really loved lasting effects in these worlds that must be observed, or that can be observed, and then bombastic conceptual abilities. I'm like, ooh, touchstones. Let's make sure that
Okay.
Yeah,
those aren't
I
lost.
could give a couple of examples of those things as they sort of popped up in the game that we played, or if you want that to wait until a later section.
I don't know.
I would like to start with bones. I always want to talk bones.
Okay,
What
let's talk bones.
what kind of mechanic is happening? What's your core mechanic
So
or
I
core
had
system?
an idea for a core mechanic. I'm not married to it in any way, shape, or form. But the idea that I initially came up with was that you would have a few base stats. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if every stat was also like its own little health bar? So like
Yeah.
you didn't really have like a health pool, you had a stamina stat that dealt with like physical feats of strength and endurance, but also that could get diminished by attacks. And then you'd have like a focus bar that would have to do with fine tasks or tasks of perception, sort of your lock picking and your awareness, kind of your rogue skill. I think it would also cover ranged weapons.
Mhm.
But my concern with that, right, okay. Each of those little blocks, you'd also have like, I'd imagine they'd be blocks that you could fit a d6 into on your character sheet, and you could just move that d6 up and change it to the current number that it is between 1 and
Oh,
6.
that'll be fun.
Yeah, and then you could pick
Yeah.
it up and you could roll that number of d6s and count successes. The problem that I was running into with that in my mind was it does create kind of a death spiral, and
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure if that's the tone I want for the game. I really like that system. I also had a few other ideas about it. That actually, the wild thing is, after we spoke for the first time, Viditya,
Mhm.
I I looked up Bloodbeam Badlands, and I started reading that, and I love it, by the way. And I
Thank
realized that
you.
like the system that you use in that is really similar to kind of what I was thinking of. I loved what you did with that. Um, but I was also
Yeah.
realizing like how good a fit it was for kind of post-apocalyptic survival,
Mhm.
and that has kind of made me realize that maybe it's not the best for my game. So I tried to sort of adapt it away
Mhm.
from that, and what I've gotten to is this idea of, yes, you have these stat bars that might get affected by various status effects, but derived attributes from them. So if your stamina is 3, for instance, and you roll 3 dice, then maybe if you multiply that by 5, that's how you get your hit point pool. And you would have 15 hit points.
Okay.
As far as that goes, that is kind of where I'm at right now. Again, not set on it, not married to it, just kind of, it's been going through a lot of permutations in my mind. The other thing that I do kind of know that I want to do at this stage is I want the players' powers that are, unique. They have just awakened. They're unlike things that other people in this world can do. They have to do with this, this cosmic power flooding into them. I want them to feel like they're really cool and can accomplish great things, but also they're very risky because they're hard to control. And I wanted to accomplish that in a couple of ways. The first is that your power is a spectrum, starting with 0 in the center and moving out in 2 different directions. Depending on the build of character that you choose, your spectrum will be different. So for instance, one character might have a spectrum between order on one side and chaos on the other. And if that fighter shifts towards order, then they might get a +1 to tasks involving order, but a -1 to tasks involving chaos. And that slider could sort of swing back and forth, and it would kind of represent this power wanting to bring balance to the aspect that it governs, and therefore the characters being, let's see how to word it. The character in the story is feeling this push from an outside force to try and do things a certain way that may go against their will. And that's represented by the player past the 4th wall, feeling influenced that certain choices they know are statistically more likely to succeed than others.
I like
so it's
that.
kind of 4th wall crossing idea
Okay.
to be under your control.
So I have a question based off.
Yeah.
So you have conceptual and mechanical ideas, and I see a few questions of is this what it needs to be, or is this the vibe I'm going for? So
yeah, absolutely.
a thing that I like to establish relatively early when designing a game, especially when it's I have a mechanical idea I like, but is it doing what I want it to? I'm unsure about it. It's how do you want player characters to feel? So, or how do you want players? There's kind of 2 sides to it. How do you want the characters to feel, and how do you want player characters to feel playing? So it's I kind of call it my golden question or my golden rule. So it's
yes.
every mechanic I make should go back up to, okay, do I want players to be playing characters that are powerful? So it's powerful at a cost is the feel. So it's okay, does this mechanic feel like it is powerful at a cost? Or that Bloodbane Badlands is powerful at a cost is kind of why I say it, because it's just spend a resource to do something really cool, but that resource is precious. So you make the choice to do something unhindered, but you're now lessened because of it, right? So where's your kind of philosophical idea of what you want these mechanics to feel?
Right. I think I can answer that question and also talk more about the bones of my game by talking about the system that I initially ran this in and what I'd like to preserve from what I learned there, if that works.
Perfect.
So at my table, we originally ran 7 Cities in its prototypical form in a system called the Sentinel Comics role-playing game, created by Greater Than Games. And that system is for superhero role-playing, and it is very narrative, very flexible. It does an interesting thing where heroes get stronger as time goes on, and it's meant to emulate comic book storytelling over a series of issues. It does a few things that I really liked. The first is that the initiative system is very loose in certain ways. It's not completely freeform, but everybody goes once per round. But the order that happens is up to the last person who went. So that person can then pass it to someone else of their choice who hasn't gone yet. And the last person to go gets free reign. They can pick anybody but themselves. So this means that you could organize it so that all the heroes go in a row, but then all the bad guys will go in a row too. And so you kind of have to juggle that.
I love a popcorn initiative.
It led to some of the coolest combo attacks that I had seen that really emphasize each character's strengths and their teamwork. The other thing I really liked about the system is that it allowed you to build a character entirely focused on support and feel extremely valuable to the team and like you were doing cool things every turn.
Mm-hmm.
You could build an entire character around buffing allies, debuffing enemies, and really be indispensable and feel like you have a lot of agency and effectiveness and creativity in how you approach things. And the other thing that I liked is that it abstracted movement in such a way that characters could get around and we could play out these very bombastic scenes. I keep using that word. I like it a lot.
It's a good word.
These scenes wherein fights or just whatever the action was, you know, a chase, a heist, it was taking place across wide swaths of the environment. And as I was trying to give a whirlwind tour of the setting and show off everything I could about it, that was perfect. So the things that I liked about that I want to sort of enhance and amplify, first of all, I want a system for explicit team-up attacks. I wanted for team-up actions in the game. And I was thinking that the way I could do that is embroiled into each character's I should probably explain my idea for how I'm building a character in this. I'll do so real quick. There's 2 steps to it, essentially. You choose your origin and you choose your awakening. Your origin is your life before you got your powers, and your awakening is what your powers do and how they change you. So I was thinking that based on each character's awakening, that's where they would get their spectrum. It is unique for each awakening. They are based on the different cities. You have an influence that represents a city that's not your own. And your awakening would also give you essentially half of a combo attack. And so pair that with half of somebody else's combo attack, they would mesh together and you'd get unique combinations within the party. The other thing that I wanted to do is, let's see, we were talking about initiative and we were talking about combo attacks. Yes. The other thing that I wanted to do was take that system, which used different locations. You would divvy up the environment that the players are in, not by their not by the geometric area of each part of the environment, but rather by like notable landmarks or things that are unique to that scene, so that each one felt like its own little zone. And no matter what, if you were in that same zone with somebody else or something else, you could get to it and interact with it on your turn. No question.
Right.
It didn't matter if you were a hero shooting a bow and arrow or a hero who is punching things. You can get to those mooks and you can knock them out on your turn. I like that it was that abstracted. I'd like to make it a little more complex than that, just in a different direction from grid-based combat, giving locations tags that allow them to be interacted with in different ways.
Sure.
And I think I would use a lot of tags in this game. And I think a lot of heroes or players' powers would have to do with modifying those tags in some way to represent them sort of exerting their will in reality. I know that's
Okay.
a lot that I've thrown out there.
I feel like I want to.
I didn't answer your root question though.
Yes.
Powerful at a cost, definitely.
Okay.
I want players to feel like this is a very cinematic's not exactly the right word, but I'm reaching for something like that. Sure. I don't want it to be something that gets bogged down in detail, but I also want the players to feel like they have enough to work with that they can really strategize and pull off cool stuff together. I want them to feel cool on their own. I want them to feel like teaming up is really, really powerful, really potent. I hope that helps.
So like, do you want like to, it sounds a lot like you want them to feel like superheroes to a degree, like it came
a little
from
bit
superhero.
Yeah.
These are heavily powered people, not underdogs in a bigger city.
Well, so that is where it gets a little bit confusing. well, not confusing, muddied. It gets muddied.
Mhm.
The party will be stronger in certain ways than pretty much anything that the seven, the people who created these worlds, can throw at them,
Mhm.
but not the seven themselves. I want part of the risk of using your powers to be exposing yourself and earning the seven's direct attention. On the day that they reign, they are like gods. And the
Right, yeah.
party can build up to a point where they can topple them, potentially. But I want that to be a very risky thing. To that end, more bones for the game. Because this is a game where you're tracking essentially different settings and things are localized to them. Players cannot just go at their whim to things that are in a day that they are not currently experiencing. It becomes important not just to have character sheets for every player, but also some sort of central sheet in the middle of the table where you could keep track of, perhaps in rough form using clocks, time, but also some very basic stats about each day. How much resources that you have gathered in that day that you can put to use for various things, and also your notoriety in that day, which would affect rolls that you would make that would sort of decide encounters or what's being thrown at you. And also possibly just a stat representing the resistance that you have built up in that day by swaying the populace one way or another. Even if the party is still on the stage where they feel like they're fugitives, they are fish out of water, they're just trying to survive and lay low, when the entire world would hunt them down, because they sense that something is amiss and there's a threat to that system, survival is a form of resistance.
Okay. All right. Resistance is another big thing. All right. So you do have a lot of systems that you've thought about.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would love to pipe in if I could, Viditya.
Yeah.
Please do.
Because chat is completely hand with the Celeste fans in here.
I love
Chat
it.
is absolutely brimming with Celeste
Aw.
fans. We've got a bunch of your players here to talk about what a great GM you are. We have got we have a question. What was your greatest inspiration for this setting? And what is your favorite city or dystopia idea so far, if you can share?
Oh,
Also,
okay.
Xander Command says Celeste for Prez.
Aw. Thanks, Xander. Wow.
They're coming out for you, Celeste.
I know. I love this.
I'm trying to resist tearing up. I will try and hold it in for now. So those are some interesting questions. My greatest inspiration for the setting, kind of two things, hand in hand a little bit. There was a blurb on the back of a sci-fi book that I read. I did not read the book. I kind of bounced off reading the book, to be honest, because I did pick it up after I read it, and I tried. It probably felt like it wasn't for me. But Philip Jose Farmer wrote this book called Day World once upon a time, and Day World, the conceit of it is that in the future, to solve overpopulation, they decide to put 6/7 of the populace in stasis most of the time, and it like rotates out. And so like all the Monday people live on Monday, and then they go back into stasis, and all the Tuesday people come out and they live on Tuesday. And so like these societies have gradually diverged. Like Monday is wildly different than Tuesday, but like for whatever reason, the main character just like secretly lives all 7 days, and he'd be punished if he was found out or something like that. Anyway, I thought that was a really fascinating idea, this idea of different days and someone sort of hopping between them and trying to kind of keep that incognito. But each day was like a different society. And I decided to extrapolate a little bit. I was like, what if nobody in this world knew about it? What if it was completely supernatural? What if each day had just like different laws of reality? And the other thing that really, really influenced that is I read this book series as a kid. I was obsessed with it, really sort of defined a lot of kind of how I conceive of fantasy and inspired a lot of wild ideas I have, called Keys to the Kingdom by Garth Nix. And that was a book series about, it was a lot of things, but essentially there was this house that was the center of all the universe and all the matter that was in it, and it was way bigger on the inside than it was the outside. It has these different floors, and each floor is like a different world. Like the third floor is just a giant ocean that's bigger than anything below it, but that somehow works. Don't question it. There's a lot more to it than that, but I will not get into it. But there were a lot of really interesting things. A lot of it was like strangely for the human character experiencing this world, all of these things were strange to him, but it was through this lens of mundanity, like the immortal denizens of the house would sample human illnesses that were smuggled into the house so they could experience them because they never did as they were immortals, and just stuff like that. But yeah, overall, just this idea of these different worlds, this sort of almost genre hopping at times, and this idea of the universe being divided up into 7 different parts across different days. All of those things kind of coalesced in my mind. They spun and they spun and they turned into something else. They turned into this. So,
okay, I have a question for you.
Please go right ahead. Oh, I need to answer the second half of that question, but please ask yours first.
What was the second half of the question?
My favorite
what your
of the
favorite
dystopias.
dystopia is. You have 5 words.
5 words. I guess
That's 2.
that's 2.
I'm kidding, Celeste, but we do need to get back to Viditya's question.
I'll say it shifts. You can't make me pick one of my babies above the others, but right now it's probably Ordinus, and we will get to why maybe in a little while.
Okay. All right.
So you have an idea, you have a lot of mechanical ideas, you're thinking about all these different bits. I kind of want to know what you are picturing as, what does a session look like? Let's say you, and I know a session is time-wise is a little different, but like for me, a session is about 3 hours. I know that's on the smaller side for home campaigns. But yeah, like what do you think players will achieve in a session of this game?
I think about 2 to 3 hours is what I've been playing recently. I will probably have players correct me on that because I do not have a good sense of time. But I think a session would look like you would gather together, do a brief recap, and then I think if it's the start of a new day, you'd make some sort of roll with notoriety or resistance, those 2 stats I talked about earlier, to determine potential boons your party would have access to, or threats that would be coming down on them. And then the party would go about doing whatever they were sort of embroiled in. And that would be very loosely tracked by a sort of clock system that you have. Narrative scenes would be, given a lot more leeway. The thing about combat not being so like a round is 6 seconds, like in D&D, your character's round is as long as it feels, as long as it's reasonable to be, which allows you to say like, okay, we can say that a combat is like 3 clicks on this clock, for instance. Crucially, a session is not a single day. A session is not a single city.
That's important.
Multiple sessions could take place in the same city, and you could also spend an entire day's time in game resting. As you sort of try and balance your notoriety in certain days, you could get it pretty down low in certain days and not really have to worry about them as much, and take that time to rest as you focus on dealing with problems that have cropped up in other days. Time is very stretchy to the players, but to the characters, it's very rigid. I don't want the players to feel the time pressure.
You do not want the players to feel time.
Except when potentially they are bargaining to succeed on rolls. I'm thinking extra time being paid as a cost for that could mean a lot more in this game than it does in other games where it sort of suggests that as a mixed success. Is your effort takes more time. Here we would have an actual physical way of tracking that. So that is a thought that I have.
So where were we on the session? So they check time. That's kind of where we were. We're still kind of in the setup, right? And then they go off, and that's what you're saying about the things might take some things to do, like they're going to go off, and you're keeping track of what their objective is and so on. Right.
And I imagine the GM would also just be, throwing things at them and having them deal with them. If there is a lull, orcs attack, etc. Not orcs, but you get what I'm saying.
Do you see so you have a setting based objective. So the objective ultimately, or do you want every table to be like your objective is to take out the 7 rulers of each city?
So that is a very interesting question, because I think that each party will sort of need to decide that for themselves. I kind of have a sort of branching endings to a potential narrative for this game in my own mind, but the party are free to find their own way. To give an example, in the game that I ran, I had it set up so that one of the 7 at least said that he wanted to return time to the way it was, which would probably be a cataclysmic process for a number of reasons, but it would set right everything that the 7 had done wrong. At least that's what he tried to convince the party of. Whereas another one said, hey, you're only being hunted because you've got these abilities and people don't know if they can, trust you. If you just work with me, take out this person who's hunting you, take out this member of the 7 who I have beef with, but we can't actually do anything about it because we have this, pact that we all made that prevents us from hurting each other directly. Then I'll make sure you're taken care of and you're safe and you can just work for me. You'll be protected. You can even take their place. You can even replace them. And the party instead went for a third option, trusting neither of those people, which was for the best and what I was, counting on them to do. But yeah. And they began a process of gradually, okay, I should talk about the Ouroboros.
Wait, hold on.
I know we're kind of past the lore section, but this is kind of
before we get into this, because you brought up something that I really want to get your answer on. So two things. So
yes,
kind of 2 questions. Is it important for you? Because again, sorry, I want to preface this a little bit with because how you were answering, like, I don't know, I want the party to figure out what they want to do, but
within bounds, yes,
within bounds. So I want to find those bounds. I want to ask you to see if we can find those bounds of, like, what do you want to be established, and is the party having a relationship with the 7? Is that something that you want to see in every game at like various ones, and then that relationship being different based on what city?
Totally. Excellent question. Yes, to an extent. So in the game that I ran, it was meant to be a prototype. It was very fast. It was not sort of a long running campaign. It was one series. And so I wanted to give a whirlwind tour of the days. And I wanted to introduce sort of the major antagonists of the plot and the features of the worlds. And so the party did encounter not even all of the 7, but they did encounter a few and had significant relationships with them, whether they were antagonistic or however, I could see a long-running game having the 7 as a looming threat in the background for a very long time. The thing about the 7 is they are also traversing the days. If you are being tracked down by bad guys in one day and they corner you and dawn breaks, you now have 6 days to figure out how you're going to get out of the situation before it gets back. And those bad guys are none the wiser. You're dealing with stuff in between, but that's a pretty big edge for the party. The 7, once they're aware of you and working directly against you, the ways that they do that can be subtle and spread out over the days, and they can, start to apply pressure on you. And that's what that notoriety roll represents, really, is the 7 applying pressure in subtle ways. Now, I have designed each of the 7 as characters with their motivation for creating their worlds, things about their personality, strengths and weaknesses they have, ways their plans manifest. How sympathetic each one is something that I allow to swing. I have ideas about how each could be more sympathetic or less sympathetic, whether they could be, how they could be deposed, who they might have been before, how much that matters, and what their motivations might be in the present. Those are all things that I would have as like suggestions, and also how to defeat them and what form their opposition might take, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I have got a question for you, Celeste.
Yeah, go for it.
Question for you. How much muscle is a non-Celeste GM going to have storyline-wise?
Okay, so that is the thing. I want each of these days, like we got really focused in on the 7. I want each of these days to be so flavorful and have so much room for so many plots for people to explore at their whim. And that's why I kind of focused up on building the 7, is like, if a player doesn't want to mess with that, I want to have like set motivations for them and things they can pull on and plots they can draw on, like pre-written.
Okay.
And I want the days
So if I
themselves
were
to be
to-
very broad. And if
if
you
I
need
were
to
to pick up
interject the
this
7
book.
as a major threat, then that's how they could come in. But mostly you can focus on this for a while, for most of it.
Okay. So your plan is if I were to pick up this book, there would be a lot of pre-written GM material in it.
That's my eventual hope. Yes.
Okay. Yeah,
Okay.
I can see that. I can see each one. So, yeah, it's coming together. I think like the thing. So the thing
Yeah,
I'm
we've
trying to
talked about it in a weird order.
well, no, I mean, I think the thing that I'm trying to narrow down, where I'm like, okay, here's you have all these ideas, and you have more concrete mechanical ideas than I thought from before. So I'm like, okay, cool.
Okay.
That's you understanding that, but it's the how is it packaged that I'm trying to figure out too.
Yes.
So how do we get? I'm trying to find a picture of you've run this and this is your world,
Right.
and then what does it look like detached from you? So that's why I asked you that session question, because then you can start thinking about it outside of that, or it's like, okay, I want people to have some kind of relationship with the 7, whether they're meeting them directly and talking to them directly, or you're feeling the effects of them. I want players to, with how much you sounded excited about the combat system, I'm assuming you want, not every session needs to have combat, but most, like a good session, a full session in this game sounds like you would have some kind of combat, is a vibe I'm getting, right? Like,
or just action scenes. So
or just action,
the Sentinel comic system does is they have an action scene where things engage and players can use their abilities, and they have it on a scene timer. And that timer also dictates when they unlock like certain abilities they have access to. I don't know if I'd want to do something similar to that, but the idea of a timed action scene that may not even necessarily be combat. The players ran a heist at one point.
Yeah, that
right. But the idea of the really cool thing about the timer that I didn't think I'd like, but it turns out I like a lot, is that if you set up all these challenges for players at the beginning and be like, hey, here's your objectives this time, and you make those objectives really modular and kind of easy to insert with just a little bit of flavor text, and then you put those in, then the players are going to go, wow, that's a lot. We've got to strategize on how to do that. These 2 things have to be in order. These things can happen at any time. Can we leave that to the end? And then by the end, if they've accomplished everything, great. That is awesome. If they haven't, that's more lingering threads for you to pull on. Something happens. A villain got away. A plan, didn't succeed here. They didn't get this artifact they were looking for, whatever the case may be. And that is a really cool way to keep things rolling. It also doesn't, it allows you to challenge the party and create losses for them is the wrong word, but complications and consequences for them that are not just the death or injury of their character.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think that's the other important thing about the setting that you've created is this idea that like you will be leaving a situation in stasis and you'll be forced to come back to it where you were before. So
Yes.
like you will change, but the world hasn't, which I think is unique and fascinating about this. So it's like having some kind of action. So again, setting that kind of, what is your ideal session? It's like having some kind of action sequence as a part of an ideal session, because then things go right and things go wrong. And because of that, you could bounce time and then have to deal with the consequences after, is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely.
Right?
Like that is an excellent way to very, very much put what I'm going for into words that are a lot clearer. Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for. That's
really
exactly
appreciate
what I'm trying to get at. Yeah.
That also reminds me of something else that I do want to mention. Kat, you asked me earlier, how much workload is this going to be for the GM? Ideally, I want that burden to be shared quite a lot by the players too. And I think that's where a lot of the fun comes in, is that collaboration. You do have that sheet in the middle of the table, and I want there to be character advances in the form of changes that you've made to the world, organizations that you found, breakthroughs that you have, places you discover, art that is created, things that will change things, sway people, have lasting effects. and those to be decided on by the party and resources pulled toward them. And that would give the party something to work towards in the course of play and might dictate what they choose to do. So the GM is not always saying danger is coming down on you or assigning a mission or saying this is what you have to do. The party might go, hey, how do we get this that we need for this?
Yeah.
And then the GM can answer that question.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Do I have?
I hope that is helpful.
Yeah.
And
I do want to mention one last little lore thing real quick.
Mhm.
That is the Ouroboros. So in the story of Seven Cities, the world before all of this happened was, when I ran it, very much like our own. But I could also see somebody saying, hey, what if our fantasy world was carved up in such a way, and we have these recognizable characters from our game? So ultimately, that's flexible. But if you imagine a world much like our own, one day these 7 people, their identities kind of lost in strange ways because of what they did next, joined forces to kill time, or time's avatar, its eldritch embodiment, an entity you could call the Ouroboros. It is not something that can be conceptualized really by a mind in 3 dimensions. The 7 somehow managed to kill it. They took its power into their own and into themselves. And their reason for doing so is that each believed that they could create a perfect world using that power. Each believed that they could create a utopia. But their visions of it were mutually exclusive.
Mhm.
And so they worked together out of necessity, even though some hated each other and still do. But when the deed was done, they carved time into 7 parts that would need to be shared equally. And they would have to live in one another's days as well. They created these worlds, willed them into being with the raw power of the Ouroboros flooding through them in those moments, which they then lost access to a large portion of it in the same way. And so that initial wish can't really be undone in the same way. And it was kind of like a wish on a monkey's paw. It amplified the flaws in their vision. The Ouroboros' power fought them. A creature like that doesn't truly die or know death in the same way as a mortal would. And so the worlds that they brought into being were flawed. They are constantly trying to gain control of them or push back on what they see as interfering with their perfect vision. And so they are, I'm realizing it's actually kind of a lot like the Ravenloft setting in D&D,
Sure.
in that the lords of that realm are also all tormented by them. They're all prisons for them. This is like their punishment for killing time in the case of the 7. That's kind of true. In addition, since the Ouroboros just, doesn't die in the same way, they had to split it into pieces and seal it within their own realms and guard those seals and make sure that power didn't break away. But now those seals have begun to break and that power is coming out. And so that's why some random people are getting some of the Ouroboros' power and are therefore given these abilities and potentially move to try and reverse things, set things right. Doing so would come at a cost. So that is why the party will face a difficult choice in the end.
so I have a question. My question for you. I have a question for you.
Yes.
I am a character. I have the powers. I have a little bit of the time powers. I've stolen them. I've eaten them. I've gobbled them up. Delicious.
Okay.
I want
Perfect.
to go climb a wall. What
Yes.
physically is my player doing to enable me to go climb a wall?
You
By
probably
which
would
I
not
mean-
use your big powers for that, but under the
Okay.
system that I delineated earlier, you would say you have a stamina of, is climbing a wall a good thing for your character? Is it a difficult thing for them? Let's say you have a stamina of 4. You'd
Okay.
pick up 4 dice and you'd roll them.
Okay.
And then you would count the number of successes you get.
D10s. Oh,
I'm thinking D6s.
You said D6s. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
so.
oh yeah, you did. Okay, I'm
Initially,
listening to Wi-Fi.
initially, I was kind of leaning toward D10s, but that was before I had the like stat bar system, and I don't
Okay.
know if I'll lose the stat bar system and return to the D10. I don't know.
Mhm.
But for now, let's stick with the D6s.
Okay. Alrighty. We are rolling. We are counting successes. Delicious.
Yes.
I'm more interested. I'm kind of interested if I want to kind of push this a little bit further.
Yeah.
We roll the D6s. We fail. What happens?
Okay. I imagine at that point, I don't know what success thresholds are going to be. I'm always a little
That's
weird
fine.
about like
Small
success
number.
thresholds.
The number itself doesn't matter. We fail. What mechanically is going to happen to the character? Right?
I think then you're presented with an interesting choice. I think then you're presented with the choice of whether you want to succeed at a cost anyway, or whether you want to accept that failure. You're not getting up that wall. You might need to try another route. If you really want to get up that wall, you can. You might drop and break something. It might cost you more time as your gear gets hung up, or you have trouble finding a handhold, or in climbing that wall, some rocks could tumble down, someone could arrive on the scene and notice, and suddenly you're being pursued.
Okay.
I like the idea of characters being able to spend resources to succeed anyway at a cost. That just feels better to me inherently than nothing happening when you roll. And I don't like just punishing characters every single time something happens. And that's not necessarily the tone of the game I'm looking for. I want there to be consequences, but I want them to be consequences of players' choices and gambles that they consciously take, and not of every single mundane action.
Okay.
I had interrupted you, Kat. Was there something you were going to say?
What? Oh no. We are. Viditya, do you have any last questions? Because we are at the end of us question time, and we are about to round the corner into Celeste question time.
I just wanted to. No, actually, I think I have most things that I can think of. Yeah.
I have one final question.
Go for it.
How concerned are you about mental load?
Like me personally, or like for people playing this game?
Well, partially you, because you're the. How can I put this? You're the GM you're building for. That's kind of pretty apparent right now.
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
Okay. That's not an indictment. That's
what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. This game is not going to be for everyone. I do want to make it as accessible as possible while remaining what it is. I want there to be like that resource in the middle of the table that I mentioned. I want as many things as possible to be abstracted to things that can be tracked on a page, whether that's your character sheet or whether that's something in the center of the table for all players to see. So I want I think that will help with a lot of things. What they abstractly mean are things that are going to be focused on the table, but I don't want there to be a bunch of like small minutia to take care of. I want there to be a few broad things, and maybe there's a few broad things for every single day, and that kind of stacks up, and that is a concern, right? There will definitely need to be like session note taking in a game like this. But I also I like the 7 cities because I think of it as a week, and I think it's nice and symmetrical and thematic. But also I could totally see a version of this game where you pulled out 4 of them and just ran it with 3 days in a loop. And I want that to be totally doable. I also, eventually, this is a very eventual thing, want to have a toolkit for people who want to make their own day and insert it, or make all of their own days. But that is later down the line once I have an idea of what that would entail from knowing how all of this comes together.
All right. So that closes off the time to ask Celeste questions. I'm sorry, chat. You have a ton of lore questions, but you're going to have to take those to Celeste. Celeste will, I'm sure, be thrilled to tell you, but we've got to focus on the bones if we're going to get this game built and playable. Speaking of which, Celeste, it's your turn to ask our co-pilot some questions.
Okay, happily. So the first thing is the one mechanic that I have not talked about yet, which is how your awakening works, your powers, your cool stuff that's unique to your character. The way I envision that working is you would have a pool of points that it draws on, one of your statistics would be power, and then you'd receive bonuses to certain. I imagine they all start at 2, right? And you'd receive bonuses to certain ones at character creation, ones that are based on choices you made, and ones that are based on, stuff that you chose, and eventually you could level them up. But no matter what, power is something that starts at 2 and never increases beyond that during character creation. You can only get that by, leveling up and making that choice, because it's something brand new to your character. It's something they have no idea how to control. That's part of the fun of it, I would hope. And so,
sorry.
No worries. I had a couple of different ideas about how to accomplish this sort of abilities getting out of control angle. If there's a PowerPoint pool, so say you multiply your thing by 5 and you have a PowerPoint pool of 10 to start, and you use an ability, you would roll a number of dice based on how powerful that ability is or how much you've amplified that ability. And that would be how many points it costs. I want the cost to be variable. There is this RPG I looked at once upon a time called Overlight, which is a very, very interesting bundle of ideas. The one that's my favorite out of it is the idea of their sort of magic system, their chroma. It has this thing called shatter that can happen. Whenever you roll a check, one of those dice determines how much that ability costs between 1 and 4 for your chroma, for your magic. And if it goes over the number of points you have remaining, that ability shatters and something abnormal happens with it and probably affects your character forever, changes them in some way. And also, if the same ability shatters 3 times, you just lose access to it, but your character's changed forever in a way that's thematic on it. So like a character who could create a force field as a shield, by the time there's a 3rd shatter, they now have a small force field surrounding their entire body, just a hair's breadth above their skin, and they can't feel anything anymore ever again.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, nothing quite that drastic probably, but I thought that was cool, and I liked the idea of powers having a variable cost, and you'd be gambling, is this going to overdraw?
Yeah, I think that's
that cost. I want there to be a risk inherent in that. So another, because I was talking about derived statistics, another thing that I had was your stamina determines your health, your power determines your PowerPoint pool. But if you had a focus stat or a willpower stat, then that could also determine how fast those things regenerate. One thing about this game is you're not guaranteed the long rest every single night. You'll have to choose when your characters rest and recuperate, and you can keep pushing yourself for a while. So when you rest, that's going to be a big deal. It's when you're going to recoup your strength. So certain characters might have less power to throw around, but they might regenerate it faster, letting them use it more often. That was an idea I had.
All right. Was there a question?
The question is, what do you think of that?
What do I think about it? I mean, I think I like it works with that idea where you were I want players to. I wrote down you like the word bombastic. I think that's solid. So it's does this feel bombastic? Yes. This bombastic kind of comes with, it's heavily powered, but there's a cost to it. Powerful, but at a cost. Right. That feels really nice. This is a preference for me. There's dealing with numbers, modifying numbers a lot. So it's like generating a pool that you're depleting based off of a stat is for me 1 step more than I would like in a game, because but that depends on how much you want to fluctuate. So there is that, but I think ultimately the idea of when you roll to do something cool, you can do it, but what you're rolling for is the cost, I think is a really fun idea. So
that's what I wanted to accomplish. You may have to roll for normal checks to do things within, human parameters, but your abilities, they should always be they should never sputter out, but they might cause some sort of other chaotic effect or overly orderly effect.
Okay. And then you kind of play into that zone.
Right.
I think it's fun.
I'm trying to think of another question now, but one.
I'm thinking with my little brain, see, because so far you have described a lot of systems and they're all extremely cool, and I love that.
See, that's the thing. I've had all these ideas. I don't know how they connect. I don't know what the central point is.
Yeah.
I don't know what I need to shave off because it's going to be a lot of it. I just need to identify what works best and what's important, and then go from there.
If you're looking, so if you're looking for limitations, then like that's kind of the, like, you take a number that's a stat and you multiply it by something and you get a pool, and then you roll a die that subtracts from that pool that then goes down. You're now 3 steps into a thing. I assume, creating the pool is
right. That's character creation.
That's character creation. Yeah. But it's like I enjoy things with like Overlight you mentioned. They theme themselves around a single die, or like they theme themselves around the range of dice, and then they're like the D4s.
Right. That was a little. Every check is 7 dice. I do not want that. That is.
But but like. The idea behind it is a player focuses on one thing, or they focus on one mechanical thing. So you give them a number, and then everything around it deals with either raising that number or lowering that number.
Right. That was
checking
cool.
against that number, doing something like that. So like, you're like, what does a normal check look like? I want to climb a wall. Well, you're not using a power, so you roll a die, and you're looking for successes. And then, you determine whether you hit it, is a very different system currently than the power deals with a different system. So finding a way to maybe marry the two, that they're looking at the same number, but maybe in a different way, or they're looking at the same number, but when you use a power, it lowers that number. So every time you do a normal action, it's, so that's where you start melding stuff where it's, do these need to be separate? Where can I find a middle ground? Like, can I have both systems look at the same number? How does now using one system affect the other one, and so on? So
reduce, reuse, recycle.
Yes.
I do want these things to affect these things, because how your character is behaving in the world will affect their alignment on the spectrum that you have. So
it's not just that, though. It's that you've proposed a setting in which the players are keeping track of 7 different timelines, which is rad and cool and very exciting. But you can't also expect them to keep track of a dozen different ways of resolving different situations.
Right. But
that's going to blow their little brains out.
I think the ability, though, would just say, like, it does this.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and you see how much it costs. And then every ordinary check would just be an ordinary check that you'd roll with dice. Right. I don't think that alone is, I mean, maybe,
well,
but
yeah, my concern is that, like, ordinary checks do this, combat does this, abilities do this, and they're completely different frameworks. Remembering how those different frameworks work, even if the ability just says it does the thing, is going to mean that for every situation you need to know how to resolve it. That's a problem that, like, D&D has a lot, where there are specific rules for things that you have to look up as you're playing.
Well, what if there was no so Sentinels being a superhero game, it makes a big deal of the transition between an action scene and a non-action scene. Non-action scenes feel a little light. When we're doing role play and things outside of action, a lot of it is we're sort of figuring that out. It's very narrative based. There's not a lot of checks that go. I mean, I could do away with that transition. You talked about multiple frameworks, combat being different. What if it's not? Like,
what if it's not?
Yeah, I think that probably is better overall. I'm just not sure.
So there's
how to do that.
The pros and cons of this is you have a lot of systems. You either make each system a phase. That means like a phase of play. So that means people can go, we're in combat. My brain does not need to worry about anything, a third of my sheet, which is fine, right? So it's like, that's what you're worried about. And then we're in downtime. Cool. I don't need to worry about any of these mechanics. I just need to worry about it. So you have that transition to mentally switch what mechanics you're worried about. Then, but
potentially,
the alternative. So there's pros and cons to phase-based stuff, and a phase-based thing is that also it's like you're gonna oftentimes people are going to be like, I like this phase more than I like that phase, or this phase has a lot more going on, or you're constantly relearning the same mechanics every time you go back into a new phase. It works for some, doesn't work for others. So it's like that can be helpful with a lot of systems, but when you break down the barrier of the phase, then you're now introducing then you have to consolidate. And then so it's so if you feel like you like all your little systems, phases might be nice. If you feel like each phase might be a little too much, then you got to take. So there's always you got to reduce something.
Absolutely. I am very willing to reduce all, like you talk about all the systems that I have. These are just like ideas. There's some things that I really like the variable cost thing and the dramatic consequence thing and the spectrum, but like that's about it. I don't know if the basic checks need to work the way they do. That's all completely
okay.
I needed some idea to start with, but I don't know if that's going to be what works best.
We need bones.
Really simple. I just don't know how to make it really simple.
So Bloodbeam Badlands, you mentioned that you were like, oh, this is cool. And it is similar. We're doing similar things. It is inspired by the Resistance system, which is what Spire is based on.
Gotcha.
I would highly recommend you. I would recommend you check it out. So it's like, I think you would like Spire as a inspiration to see. Well, one, because Spire is all about making tangible change in a single city, and a lot of
that sounds perfect. I need to look into that.
And a lot of your powers are very narratively intriguing, and it's entirely settings driven. So it's like your powers are often not just like you get to kick fast or whatever. It's
right. I definitely don't want that. I want it to be more flavorful than that. I'm just struggling with how to get more flavorful than that, but also general enough that players don't feel locked into things, but also specific enough that like, ooh, they get to do that cool thing that nothing else can do.
I will say when you, I would also give you the advice of go all in. Don't worry about feeling like you are trapping a player. You are trapping a player. That's the fun part about a game that's so distinct. Nobody wants to be like, I don't like when I'm playing it. What would make me really interested in the game is not, I'm in this really hyper specific world, but the character options I have let me make my personality, the person I am, and then be very specific about all the powers and the flavors.
Yes.
Go full on. Don't worry about I want to make sure that people feel like they can do their own thing. There's a little bit of right.
Can I give just a brief example of like a thing that happened in the game that I ran that I would like this game to have rules that would allow me to emulate this, right? Mm-hmm. Would that be helpful to give you like an example of play, for instance? I'll try and keep it brief.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the worlds is a fantasy-inspired world, Astron. And its ruler is called the Dragon Slayer. She is a woman in red hair with armor and a big sword. That does not change day to day. What that big sword looks like, the armor, that does. She has hunted the party in clockwork steam-powered armor with a giant, bronze blade. She has hunted the party through cyberpunk streets. Mm-hmm. And eventually, they know that they are headed for a confrontation with her on her day when she will be ascendant and have godlike powers. However, they've been given a tip by one of the other 7 that in order to neutralize that, she's bound by the powers of the narrative, same as they are within her own world. If they go on a heroic quest mm-hmm. and essentially frame themselves as heroes of the people overthrowing a tyrant, she'll be forced into a fair duel with them. Mm-hmm. Now, I've talked about the popcorn initiative that was happening. Mm-hmm. They went through this heroic quest. They went through a dungeon. We played that out, and eventually the confrontation came. And when they faced off, the players were used to having initiative that they could pass back and forth and be able to deal with lining up things in a favorable manner for them when they could afford to do so, which is really cool and empowering. And when combat started, I had everyone pull out a d20 and I said, roll initiative. To represent the way that this character was essentially bending the rules of reality to her own whim in this world.
Okay.
Stuff like that. I want to make rules that are very flavorful. I want to make very general rules and then make very flavorful rules on top of them that sometimes maybe break those rules.
Yeah. So if you want, so then you have to, then I guess like my advice would be you have to slim down your systems because you don't, then things get muddy. Very system heavy games generally are like, I want to master this. And then if your abilities are not about system mastery, then there's a dissonance there. So like,
so my main worry, I thought that initially that's what I was going to start to do with my like stats as health bars thing, where you just worry about juggling those. And I wasn't doing derived statistics and power pools or anything. And then I talked to a player about it who pointed out something really valuable to me and said, well, I'm going to be honest, and that makes me not want to play a damage dealer character as much if damage is just being dealt in like chunks of 1 or 2 always for everybody. I mean, how do I convey the feeling of a character that is very, very powerful and mighty if everybody just hits for 1, right? I mean, that's I don't want combat to feel like Powered by the Apocalypse for this. Is the thing.
Well, I mean, like, I guess,
right?
Well, it's to me, it's bombastic combat is not about the number. Numbers make tense combat. When you go from 5 to 2, you feel that in a tense combat game, like HP and stuff like that. So, you could still like you can push. Okay, I'm gonna loop back again for a second. Another reason why I recommend the resistance system, the Aspire system, is because its stats are also its health. So there's that whole cost thing to it. But yeah, Kat, you were gonna say.
Speaking of which, Celeste, I put the link to the resistance system in our Google Meets chat. And I put the link to the resistance in chat for you guys as well. So you can check out the resistance toolbox as well.
You should. I mean, it's one of my favorites.
It sounds like something I should have looked at already, actually.
Yeah, and that's fine.
I've been meaning to write a game for it forever, for literal years.
I also looked up the Lumen system at your behest, Kat. Which is like another thing that's sort of challenging me with this system. That's very like looter shooter in the way it feels, which is cool, but it's not the right vibe for this game, except for one of the days, and the powers themed on that day, it totally is. I could see a power with a character who's like, I hit this enemy and they give me a loot drop, and everybody's like, why did that work? You just punched out a robot and a bow and arrow fell out. And it's like, it just does.
So like, that's also where I think if you want your players to feel like powers have a cost, actions are something that they are managing. Like if you're worried about damage, if you're worried about taking out a bunch of things and streamlining it down to simple numbers, then make it about like, and it's the superhero genre trope anyway, where it's like, you know, 2 guys will punch each other a bunch. Like Superman will be punching a bunch of things, and then it's that critical moment when they get actually damaged. So you're playing towards the critical moment there, and maybe like damage dealers aren't necessarily about like where's my cat? Aren't necessarily about like we're gonna take them down, but that team attack bonus of like maybe a damage dealer is a finisher. So it's like your idea is not I'm gonna be hitting them for numbers. It's let me go last. I knock them to the ground. And then you think about it. So thinking about it in terms of the story beats, in terms of the action that they are seeing, also leans into the fact that all of your abilities are about doing the cool thing. So if
Yeah.
and then maybe damage is about can you spend like your maybe like your stat or your pool, like damage kind of chunks it down, so whenever you do another cool ability it gets riskier and riskier each time. And then you can kind of consolidate your systems, because as all the systems that you're talking about, I think the most interesting one was the way that your power works, and your most I mean, and not generic, I mean in a bad way. I mean generic
Of
and
course.
like it's solid, but that like base kind of roll where you're like, okay, you know, you roll against a number and it's success or success at a cost. You can, like, I think thinking about one mechanic, which is rolling dice and does it reduce a number or not, is like could be the thing that keeps us all together. And so you can then think about stuff where, and then if you have something very simple like that, all of your fun, cool, flavorful abilities are just like roll against this stat. It drops a little bit, but you get to do the cool thing. And it's like, how often can you do the cool thing? Not.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, use
That
overheat.
is-
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
great. That is great because, again, like I'm not setting out to create a complicated system. Like the powers, that's something I definitely want to have. The idea of a lot of that that's going to happen in downtime, or that players are going to be working towards, or rewards that they've accumulated in a day, that's going to be in a sheet in the center of the table that everyone can sort of discuss, and hopefully pared down to a point where it's somewhat easier to parse than I'm able to explain it right now.
Yeah.
But all the stuff with the bones of the game, the simplicity of the game, the like your, you know, basic attributes and your basic roles, like that's where I'm completely have no idea.
Yeah.
That is something that I threw together without any sort of testing because I felt like there should be something.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
this is, yeah.
So that's actually like, and you did the right thing, or I would say you didn't do the wrong thing. You do like what I do, where it's we always kind of go off of our instincts and go off of what we've played. And so whenever I design a game, I think about, okay, I like dice pool systems. I like rolling a bunch of d6s and I look for 5s and 6s. So oftentimes I'll be like, that's fine. I put that in because I know it works. And then I focus on the thing that I think is fun and interesting that's actually a puzzle for me. And then knowing full well that certain things that I just put in because I know how games work, or I know how games I've played work, become vestigial, and then you let them go. So like that's you're doing the right thing of being like, this is what I feel like a game should have, or this is what I feel like a game will have and need to have, and then you go, I can actually let go of this and kind of swoop it in with something else.
Totally.
And I'll even say you like the thing that I've been looking for with this conversation is like where's your excitement? Like if I were to tell you like what should you focus on? I think your words are the thing that excite me the most. There's a lot of really cool little mechanical ideas that you're saying, and I like them, and you're thinking about them in the right way, and you're doing the game designer thing where you're like, I think this is a really cool system, so I'm going to smash that with this and I'll smash that with that, because that's what game designers, Lego blocks, smicking, pushing stuff together. But your world is so interesting that like your words are your mechanics. So
yes.
Think about how do you put your words front and center, and how do dice and numbers get players to your words? How do your words then like push players back? Like, and then how do your words then get them to do something that is random? So it's not just them reading your text. It's like the dice are there to augment. They give them room to put their words into your own. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes. Like I feel like it is discussing the like mechanical system that I mashed together at the beginning of this was very maybe not great, because that, do you have any more advice on how to do that? That's what I want here.
Well, I've put a link in our Google Meets chat to just like an itch.io search for SRD, because I think you
Yeah.
should go bone shopping.
You should
I
go.
think
Okay.
there's
I
a
love
lot
going
of
bone shopping. Let's do it.
like, you don't have to use them exactly as they're written right out of the box. You can modify them, you can write new powers, you can change how things work.
Right.
But like, maybe your best bet is to see what systems are out there. And that'll also help you, I think, get a feel for what a full system looks like.
Yes, absolutely. Because
Especially a full slimmer system. So it's like,
Yes.
okay, what is, because I really should read Sentinels because I think it's really interesting. But
it
generally,
is really cool and it's really slim. It is 5
Yeah.
basic actions. It is rolling 3 dice every time. They do something really clever with it. Minions and lieutenants for small enemies and threats, you do something really cool. You just take a die and you put it on the board, and that's that minion. And
Yeah.
how big the die is, whether it's a D6, D8, D10, etc., that's how strong it is. And that's what it rolls to defend itself. That's what it rolls to attack you. It is so easy to improvise with that as a GM. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
it's so cool. I love it. Like,
Uh,
I used a really slim system for this, and then I saw ways that I could modify it. I
mean, that's,
don't think
again,
I can modify it enough to necessarily, or in the right
That's
ways.
fine.
I don't know.
and
Start with lasers and feelings and work up.
yeah, like
Right.
you're doing like you're not doing anything wrong. You're doing
Oh,
what you're doing the right thing, which is getting excited, and then the next step is always it's always slimmed down. And so like the more you make games, the more you know to anticipate your scope. And
Yeah,
and
this
that's
is a
that's
wild first project.
well, and I don't know if this is comforting to you necessarily, but everyone's first project is wild. My
Yep.
first project
That is
was
comforting.
my first project was this. It was like, I have this really ambitious idea. I think it needs this many mechanics, or it's like, oh, but wouldn't it be really cool if I can do this, if I can do that? It's also this like scrapbooking, like your brain starts scrapbooking of like this. Oh, I played this game, especially when you're like playing new games for the first time. You're like, that was so exciting. Like, oh my God, that mechanic was so beautiful. What if I put it in my game? Oh my God, that mechanic was so
Yeah.
beautiful. What if I put it in my game? And then you just kind of scrapbook a game, you collage a game into existence, and then it just gets too big, it gets too out of hand. You're like, was this necessary? Is this needed? So it's all about knowing when to stop and start moving down. And I, for one, would say stop and move down.
I guess what I was very afraid of is the idea of like, if I just write out what this esoteric ability does for this player, and then I did not have enough mechanical backing for it to twist on in an interesting way, then it wouldn't feel great.
I mean, there.
Worry about that when you get there.
Yeah, so like that's kind of the like the curse with specific like distinct settings, the curse that comes with wanting to make a game that's like, I want to give something unique that I have crafted that I think is really cool, right? Like I want to make, you don't just have general abilities that you like smash together to make something unique. I have authored Bee-mancer, right? I am a mancer of bees, and I have very specific bee powers. What you need to do is just get it on the table, write as little as possible, and do players feel cool? Like, do they feel really nice doing your words? And does the situations that the nature of role playing, which is do like emergent situations happen where your powers feel fun and interesting in new situations, or is it a button that they just press and it does something? Is it repetitive? Like at that point, it's again, you're testing words, not testing mechanics. So you're like, okay, cool, maybe this needs a penalty, or maybe it's not the bees sting somebody to death, it's the bees sting somebody to harm or something, right? Like the bees,
right?
The bees obfuscate your their vision. So it's like, okay, cool. So it's like, I need to. So it's you're crafting your words, not your numbers.
That is honestly, that is just That is so helpful.
There's
There you go.
there's a bone I want to throw on the bone pile
Bones.
here from
Hey, Tony.
from the tower. Especially
And
when
for
you're
a
talking
bony
about
from Tony.
crafting your words. When you were talking earlier, one of the systems that immediately came to my mind when you were talking about people have these big powers, and when they use them, there's a cost, and sometimes they fracture. Was immediately Necronautilus. So that's the bone I
Oh
want to throw in the
yeah,
bone pile.
Necronautilus is really good.
Writing that down.
Is you're playing it's by World Champ Game Co. You're playing death agents, people who have died and shouldn't remember the last life, but your powers are words, and if you roll poorly, your words shatter. You can interpret the words however you want, right? So building on what Bid was just talking about, you can use your words in any way that makes sense for that word, right? But if it shatters, you cross out a letter on it, and you have to make a new word using only the letters that are left, and that is your new power.
Yeah.
I want to
It's
play
very
that.
cool.
That sounds amazing.
Necronautilus
I
is really-
adore Necronautilus.
it's great.
I love that freaking game.
It's amazing.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, so it's like, and that's a good way of mixing a mechanical thing, which similarly to what you were saying with your powers, of like you want to have that shatter moment. You want and like dice is a great way of doing that, right?
One more thing I want to convey. Using these abilities, there's a cost. That cost might be some aspect of yourself, right? We had, and this was just characters people created, right? In the system that I was running, you could make pretty much anything. It was a superhero game. I ended up having a lot of trust and buy-in with my party. But one of them made a character who effectively lost his ego, just kind of like got this sense of complete cosmic oneness with his powers. And another made a character who had lost her memories as a result of gaining hers. And so maybe not all at once like that, but I like the idea of gradually like paying this cost on yourself, not necessarily like the shatters and overlight taking away your power or changing up your words and rearranging them in Necronautilus, but changing you. You are becoming less human or whatever you were at the start as you use these abilities. I think, so there comes with a cost to yourself.
My question for you is like, is that something that a player decides, or is that something that between your two major character creation, your origin and your ability, what was that called again? Your awakening.
Yes.
Is that something that's determined by those two options, or is that something that a player gets to decide? My character's ego changes, or do I go, ooh, I want to play an awakening where my ego needs to be in check? Which one is it?
I think it would be very doable to tie it to the awakening, since every awakening has two aspects that are in competition from the world it's from.
That's the spectrum.
Order, chaos, right? Order, chaos, mercy, wrath, things like that. Innovation, devastation, and so it'd be very possible to tie something to that. Or I could make it changeable. One thing that I hadn't talked about was how I was thinking about progression. I came up with this idea, which, again, probably not original.
Celeste at 7:30.
Right.
Listen, this has been fantastic. You've definitely got everyone super excited, but we are at time.
Yeah, I will also say, like, I mean, you were about to talk about progression a lot. I think
not a lot, just one small idea.
Yeah. Well, hold on. It's the like.
I know it's
think about progression is something that I like to have an idea for, and then make sure that my bones are good before I think about how my bones change. So it
was the idea of how you would gain XP would be dependent on the character.
Okay. Yeah.
So someone might want to focus on fighting, someone might and I thought that doesn't really tie to any specific thing. So maybe that's just the thing you pick. Maybe it's just a third thing out there that you pick from a list of options. What's my character's personality? It has nothing to do with where they're from or the powers they have. Just
it could be nice to tie that with origin, since it doesn't seem like origin. You haven't mentioned a lot about what origin does outside of like where you are or where you've come from. So that could be an interesting thing so it's like, I care about fighting, but my spectrum is but like my awakening is pretty pacifist. So like, what do I do with that? That was
another thing, because origin also, like, people live weird lives in these worlds, and they come up against weird things. So even if they don't have supernatural powers, the average citizen might be dealing with stuff that we wouldn't in our lives. That would still be a valuable skill elsewhere. That was more for Origin. Or you could just be a ghost. You could just be a ghost from some world. That's going to affect things quite a lot. Origins for things like that. We didn't really get into that, but that's okay.
That's okay. This is not the 90-minute audiobook of the game. This is about helping you get it to where you need it to be.
This has been so helpful too, and it has been so nice talking to you.
I am so glad, because that was my next question, was as we prepare for landing, how are you feeling about your next steps, Celeste?
I feel like I have I feel like I'm further back than when I was tonight in my progression on it, but that it's a very good thing, and that you've helped me clear away a lot of the stuff that was clouding the expectation that I was feeling, and things that I felt like I needed to do for this to be legitimate, and help me kind of focus in on what's important, get to the heart of that. And that's been very valuable. You've also given me a lot of resources to look at. So I am extremely hyped to get into that. So thank you so much. This is going to be a very smooth landing for me.
I do want to just quickly say this aloud is you're never going backwards because you've come up with all the stuff that you will. It's not like you forget the things that you've written and come up with.
That's true.
A lot of game design, and especially as a game designer, when I talk about I write a bunch of mechanics and I go, I need to get rid of these. I don't delete them. I essentially just put them in a bin. And I go,
right.
So another game that I think about, I'll go into the bin. I use a Lego bin as an analogy. All of my games are Lego sets. And anytime I make a game, I dig into my Lego set and I go, ooh, here was a piece that I got from a different thing. And I put it in and I eventually kind of find a thing. And the more games you make and the more games you play, the more this bin kind of grows.
Yeah, I have other game ideas. I have probably simpler game ideas. Maybe I need to tackle one of them first. This is the one I'm the most excited about, narratively. But yeah, Lego bin, absolutely. And you're right. It is always forward progress. I have less determined than I thought I did, but that is also a form of progress. So that is very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that framing kind of helps designers who are like, oh, but I put so much effort into these ideas. I don't want to just get rid of them. And I'm like, use them somewhere else.
I got
right?
other things I want to do. It's fine.
Yeah.
All right. So everybody, it is time. So Celeste, where can people find you if they want to find out more?
I made a Tumblr for this project that I'm still in the process of filling out very slowly, but I am worldseekerdragon.tumblr.com, where you can find a very sort of basic overview of the setting in its most general terms, and I'll be posting more information and maybe eventually some mechanical details or even some art. We'll see where that goes in the future, but I'll keep people posted on there.
All right. Tony's got the link for you there in chat. Thank you, Tony. And
thank you.
Viditya, thank you so much for being on the show today. Where can we find more of your games and or your wisdoms?
You can find me online basically anywhere at Viditya Valetti, my first and last name. I'm very easy to search. I have great SEO. You can find my games at vidityavaletti.itch.io. And that's mostly where I'm at right now, is just vaguely online and then releasing some games here and there.
God, to be only vaguely online.
Do you have any physical releases coming up anytime soon?
Dude, oh my God, Tony. You will in January for the RPG Zine Club. I'll have the Longsword as a reminder, as a physical release through Plus One EXP's Zine Club, which I'm very excited about. So that's a fun game. You can get a sneak peek of it, or you can read it on my itch page and then have it physically in January, which I'm very excited about.
Speaking of which, if you want to help support emerging and expanding creators, following us here on Twitch or over on our YouTube channels are great ways to stay up to date with all the great things happening on Take Flight. We love Kat coming and hosting these for us, guiding new designers and experienced designers to new locations and design every other week. So come back anytime. This weekend, we've also got a couple of actual plays. I'm going to announce it right now. Tomorrow is Yezeba's Day. So it's Yezeba's favorite day. So a bunch of Philly-based RPG creators, including Jade Dragon, creator of Yezeba's Bread and Breakfast, are coming to my actual house. And we're gonna play. We're gonna stream Gertrude's birthday adventure tomorrow, and then Saturday we're playing Capers Cyberpunk, which is live over on the Kickstarter right now. But if you want to help support the channel, heading over to Ko-fi, signing up to get notified when Zine Club goes live. Discover new and notable games by, again, the emerging, expanding creators. That would be great. And I'm going to hand things back over to Kat to take us in.
Everyone, we have safely arrived at our destination. Remember that you can find our episodes on YouTube if you've missed any. Next time, we're talking to Max and Super Dylan about organization, project planning, and motivation. So don't miss it. Thank you for flying with us today. And remember, your dreams don't have to stay grounded. You're clear for takeoff. Bye.
I love
Bye.
Goodbye.